Okay, I'm back. And I believe by now you figured it out. It was not really about all the logistic of download that copy of the book itself. It's all about making the references and hopefully it help you to relate, just to show you the model, because you will try to figure it out, basically with reference of your own life experience. The Chinese say travel 1,000 miles sometimes beats, read 10,000 books. Because when you travel around, you see the different things, and you probably read about it, but it never really, came here and hit you. Like, wait, does that make sense? How come? And there's things of that nature. You experience, you observe it, and then you come back and try to figure it out. Okay? So sometimes you kind of arrive at some philosophical level, and not all the time, but as time goes by, you age like good wine or good black tea for that matter. Things start to accumulate and then start to point to a certain direction, and you're like all of a sudden enlightened. Okay, so there's a word for it, in uh, in Buddhism. It, in particular in Zen school of Buddhism, they call it sudden realization or sudden enlightenment, 顿悟. So you ask all the Japanese, they've all heard of that. If you write the two Chinese character, they call it kanji. So anyway, what I want to give you a reference this time in this session is from a historical story, which was, true recorded history. If you review the old Chinese history, of course, we're talking several thousand years, it's not all the same, okay? It changed, of course, back and forth, just like, what we experience here today. Today the popularism is all over the world, but, just a couple of years ago, we were all in this, harmonious, global village or whatever it was called. And today everything just changed, right? The sudden swing, or the fashion. Every 30 years you see the cycle, starting from a couple of years all the way to now. What we saw is pretty much, anywhere like a 60s or sometimes 70s, the fashion in clothes and all that kind of stuff. And today, what I'm talking about is not all that. It's about the philosophical change and the people's aesthetic value change. So in the very famous, period, what is referred to today by the Chinese historians as Wei period and Han period. So basically, this was right after, or well, actually around the the tri-state area, the war states, before, well, it always like divided and then conquered, centralized power and then decentralized. So anyway, this was around the what it was known as the tri-state. So anyway, the point, at this certain area, people start to change and they got sick and tired of a lot of things. So when one superpower conquered the other states and become a big empire of centralized power, what would that take? That took years or decades of war, harsh time on the people. So when the empire first came to power, typically the emperors realized that the people, they have been suffering way too long, and they were sick and tired of whatever you say. Man, they couldn't provide for their own kids the food on the table. So this was typically the time people kind of the royal court, the emperors, they kind of give some break, relax on the taxation, on the other things. So making sure, give some break to this, ordinary people or the commoners, some space so they can, basically adjust and get back on their feet, just so that later they can pay the heavy tax again, right? So Confucianism at this point typically would take a back seat, and the Taoists came to the front. What is Taoism? In essence, let the mother nature take over to do the job of the adjustment and rule itself. That's Taoism in politics. In Chinese, they say 为而治, means don't do anything. You don't need to do anything, which is basically you're doing a big thing. Okay? It sounds like very confusing. Not really, because when you do a little teeny tiny this, what is that? That's micromanagement as regarded by the Taoism. A lot of things you don't really do all those too tactical detailed thing and try to manage everything. All you do basically you mess everything up, right? So let the mother nature take over. You see the season change 4 times a year? Yeah, mother nature is covering that. Can you change that? Really? Give it a shot. So basically that's the theory, right? So back to the point, at Wei Han periods, the intellectuals at that time, they were all big talkers. Oh, they can tell you about the Buddhism, about the Daoism, about the Confucianism. They talk and they compare between the three, almost like any intellectuals can give you big speech for hours or days or even weeks. They just talk about things. Back then, right around that period, the ancient Chinese scholars, the intellectuals, they had too much pride to serve in any royal courts because they just didn't see the point, at this like tri-state, whatever this war states, warlords, what's the point, right? Why do you want to serve them? So back then, the emperors, the kings, they had to, basically appear before the, the little village houses of all those famous intellectuals and try to, politely invite them. Oh, would you please come to serve in my royal court? And the other ones go, I'm too busy. Sorry. So that was basically, you show off with your style. Oh, I am way above your royal court. That was the Chinese ancient, scholars back then. So anyway, around this period, there were 7 very, very famous, they were referred to as the great man of wisdoms in Chinese history. It was recorded as 竹林七贤, okay, the 7 great men of the great wisdom. So among the 7, there were top 2, okay? So this top 2, one is called Xi Kang, the other name was Ruan Ji. Okay, both of them very famous, and actually at least one of the 2 came from very long family tradition of famous intellectuals. And the Chinese intellectuals back then, they were supposed to learn everything. All of them, they could do the music composition. They compose, right? Composers. And of course, all of them practice Chinese, ancient music instrument. It's called qin, okay? All of them could do that. All of them could, do the calligraphy. They could do the landscape, Chinese ink brush paintings. All of them were poets. It was just basically everybody had to be able to do it, right? If you don't, you call yourself intellectual? Come on. So between these 2, of course, they're constantly arguing, debating, reasoning about a lot of things. And one of the things they just cannot come to agreement between the 2 is about the music, okay? So what does Xi Kang believe is one thing, and his best friend Ranji believed something totally the opposite. Ranji wrote an essay and basically claimed music, you gotta have the emotion. Okay, when you compose the music, you gotta have the emotion. When you perform it, you gotta experience the emotion so you can convey the emotion to the audience. His best friend Shikang would not agree on that. And so Shikang wrote another essay against his best friend, said, uh, music does not have any emotion, by itself. It is the performer has its own emotion, and when he performed this music, he is basically giving that emotion, in certain context, you know, and conveying to the audience. And furthermore, he said that's actually not a first class performer. The first class performer actually got all this, noble and, very, very abstract thought there. Already everything in there. So if you're just average Joe and Jack, you sit there and you listen, you don't get it. I'm sorry, you're just not good enough. According to Shikang, that's the first class, music makers. And then he come down to the second class, okay, which is good musician. It's a good musician. Basically, what you do is you don't even put the uh, emotion into the music, okay? You are trying to convey your own thought. And that should basically be above and beyond the emotion. For instance, if this is something so touching, make it, it's so, emotional, and I'm almost coming to tears. According to Shikang, this is not good music because you're still on the primitive, level. You should basically touch on something much deeper. Okay, so let's say you see a dog, and the dog is dying. Oh, look at that puppy eyes. So when you compose the music and perform this music, describing that dog, that's a sad emotion, right? So in the Western music, the Italian music, you actually would see the mark there. They actually suggest specifically, how, basically even, to interpret the music. They give you the hint. But with this theory from Shika, that's basically not deep, because you gotta look at this. A dog is dying. Yeah, so every animal, they're gonna die. They came and then they went. People, same thing. So at my level, well, this is just my take on Shikan's theory, right? At my level, yeah, they'll die. Okay? So do I feel for the poor dog? Yes, I do. But what I'm looking at is the life cycle span. So when your music's at that level, that's different. Okay? So the arts of the ancient Chinese elites, okay, it's all about your own thought, your mind, the state of your mind. What does it show? It shows how much you have done your self-improvement study. So which level you arrived at. When you're still, feeling sorry for a dying dog, your self-improvement study level is here. But when you kind of getting almost seeing through your self-study have achieved at this level. So when supposedly in old days, when you sit here listening to the music made by another, well, back then, gentlemen, do you get the music? Well, that depends on where your level is. You're here, that guy's there. And you look up and like, I don't know about that, right? So this is the theory from Shikang, right? Who is a big Taoist, very big Taoist. Now, we still talk about art, right? So before and after Xigang's time, all the ancient Chinese intellectuals, like I said, they all have to, master at least something, calligraphy or ink brush, painting in the landscape genre. Why landscape? It's for the Chinese. It's not about, oh, I do the mountain or the sea. It's not about that. It's above and beyond that. So when they had, let me just explain it over here. All the Chinese famous poets, artists, and music makers back then, all of them, almost no exception, they were all the Chinese credentialed court officials. What does that mean, credential? Because they pass through the 3 level of examination, credential examinations. And so that was the Chinese old system. It doesn't matter, your family background, your upbringing. You pass that 3 level court examination, then you become official, right? So all of them were from that circle. So this was the essence of the elite Chinese elite arts, created for and by the Chinese elites. Okay, so this was a group, not social group, not existed in any other country or culture, in history, because this is between the nobilities and the commoners. This group stayed by, themselves, and all the Chinese elite arts just came from and stayed within this circle. So back to the point, when you have your career as a professional politician, what do you experience? Up and down. You get promoted, demoted. If you didn't get jailed or have your head cut off, and you actually survived, eventually peacefully retired somewhere, that's a big accomplishment, right? So, but when you go through all this political career in the royal court, of course you have a lot of things coming through your mind, and you experience a lot of emotions. So all this philosophically reflected through your let's say music or the landscape painting. So when you see a mountain, is that about mountain? No, you see the snow on the mountain. You see one little lonely old man on a donkey, you know riding down the pass from top of the mountain and coming down to the foot of the mountain with a whatever on the back. That's only telling you how lonely the guy is, right? At that time. Or you see something so happy, oh, guy, getting high with whatever, and in the background something else, maybe a pretty woman or whatever else. The guy's having a great time. Is that anything about anything? Like what's on the subject? No, it's the context being, and the subcontext being delivered, conveyed from such, elite Chinese painting. So when you're a Taoist, what do you really fancy? You want to be going into the high mountains and to enjoy the Mother Nature at, zero distance. And all the famous Chinese intellectuals in old times, they all had such arrangement for themselves. Why? Because when you got really sick and tired of all this royal court political struggle and all that, wouldn't that be nice? You can have a little escape away from all this, of course. And that's where the Taoists kick in. And that's the Confucianism, Confucius teaching basically keep you striving for the perfection and keep climbing the ladder. And you got beat up, all the time in this court. You couldn't handle it. So this is where the Taoism come in to play the balance. All right, you don't have to do all this. Take a break, go somewhere, okay? So if you, back then, the Taoism was the thing that actually cultivated your artistic creative mind. And the Confucius teaching basically does nothing more or less than just basically keep you so aggressively pursuing your career, whatever, the fame, the money, everything, right? Uh, so you see the difference between these things? And then there's Zen there, right? So that basically see through all this. So Taoism basically gets you to kind of exclude yourself from all that crowd. But then basically, none of this means anything. I don't see nothing. Everything's a rainbow. Concentrate on your next life, not this life. I'm going to keep something for the next session, but it's going to, I promise you, it's going to get more and more interesting. Okay? Ciao.